Hi, this is Bea Boccalandro, author of Do Good at Work: How Simple Acts of Social Purpose Drive Success and Well-Being. And you are listening to From the Heart, presented by Orange Kiwi.
Bea, thank you so much. It's fun. Bea and I have been chatting here before we came on the air, and we chatted on the phone, as I typically will do with a lot of my guests. And it's one of those conversations where I almost thought, oh yeah, I need to hit record because we're already so engaged in conversation, and it's been really fun. So Bea, thank you for being on From the Heart today. I'm just going to share a little bit about you first, and then we'll just jump right in if that's okay. As she mentioned, she recently has written and had published the book, Do Good at Work: How Simple Acts of Social Purpose Drive Success and Well-Being. That right there will probably be our focus today because there's a lot right there packed into just the title of the book. You were selected by Adam Grant, a Wharton professor, and certainly a name that most of my listeners are very, very familiar with, as one of his 30 recommended books of 2020. That's pretty awesome. I'd love to hear more about
Thank
that.
you.
Love to hear about VeraWorks, the company that you founded. And I know that you mentioned in conversations before that it's been a little bit of a rough year for you, like it has been for a lot of people in the business world. You teach at Georgetown and UNLV. I'm guessing that this pandemic has made it so that you can be teaching in Las Vegas and Washington, D.C. at the same time from San Clemente, California. So welcome. Tell me a little bit about how the whole idea of writing this book came about for you, Bea.
Yeah, thank you, Ed. Well, you mentioned Adam Grant, and Adam Grant is he's a superstar. He's the youngest tenured professor ever at Wharton. He's also host of the the Work Life podcast, the TED Work Life podcast. One thing that's really beautiful about him selecting my book as one of the 30 new books to read is that when I wrote this book, the entire point of the book is to put in the hands of any worker at any job anywhere in the world. Hopefully it will be translated into many languages. End the work week feeling I did something meaningful this week. I feel fulfilled. I made the world a little bit brighter. There's a child who is smiling because of my work week, or a client who feels more hope, or a colleague that is better at their job because I mentored them. Like, I did something meaningful. I made a societal contribution this week. And so because the book is meant for anybody, I tried to make it, you used the word riveting. I tried that. I tried to get there because I wanted anybody to pick it up and be able to read it like a story. But this is a little tricky because, as you know, it has 153 footnotes. It's all evidence-based. It relies heavily on all the scientific research out there. And I was committed to making it align with what we knew worked and didn't work. So when I was writing it, I had this tension between simplifying things so that they were understandable, but not oversimplifying them so that they weren't true any longer. And my standard for doing that well was that someone could pick it up and read it and not get lost in jargon, but B, that Adam Grant would not find it to be untrue. Like, literally, it was, I met him once because we were on the same stage at one point, but I have no relationship with him or anything. But I would say if Adam Grant reads this and says, yeah, this is true to the scientific literature, this is what organizational psychologists are discovering, or economists, then I've met that benchmark. So I had sent them the manuscript before in the spring. I sent them the manuscript, and I sort of had to because I cite his research and I interpret it a tiny bit differently than he did. So I wanted to make sure I was being true to that. But I had no idea he was even considering it for any list or anything. And so when I got the email that he had selected it as the top 30, I was like, oh my God, that was the benchmark. It was Adam Grant, like, giving the stamp of approval. So it's, in any, I mean, in any situation, it would be wonderful for Adam Grant to say, yeah, this work is worthy. But in this one, it had that personal element to it.
That's awesome. And yeah, you talk a little bit about how, writing and not oversimplifying it and not overcomplicating it. College professors, you teach, I teach, a lot of us that listen, today also do. And one of the toughest things to do is, how do I keep the students that need it to be basic and the students that are like, okay, bring me more, give me more meat, give me more meat. So the answer I always hear is, let's just teach to the middle, so
Right.
the ones that need the detail and the research, and I know you have a lot of data analytics background, and so I'm sure that it was really tempting to just take it there and make this a book for college professors. But then there's a lot of people who are high school graduates who don't have any of that, and not even high school graduate, but just
Yeah.
don't have the interest. They're not the data nerd, as you self-proclaim,
Right.
that don't want all that data. So how did
Yeah.
you, as you were writing the book, um, how did you test it out? I mean, were there people who read through, your husband or friends or others who maybe kind of looked through it to kind of make sure that you were hitting that middle mark and not oversimplifying or overcomplicating?
Yes, I had so much help. I can't tell you how many people I'm grateful to. One thing that happened was the first book I had in mind was only for managers because of that tension that you talked about. I found the challenge of getting this concept across to anybody just too daunting. And I thought, well, managers are used to reading management books and taking MBA graduate courses or certificate graduate courses. So I'll write it for that audience. But I leaked early parts of the content out in a blog as a test.
Hmm.
So, and I kept hearing back, well, this is great. Uh, Thanks for the advice on how to have my team and how to be a leader with purpose and how to have my team do something together. But I want to do this for my own job. And then of course I can be really stubborn. So I kept like looking the other way. I'm like, no, I'm not writing that book. I'm writing this book. Stop asking me for, and then I realized, wait, it's a legitimate request. If anybody can do this, it really should be me. This is my day job. Come on, B, what's wrong with you? So I had to pivot. And it's one of the reasons why it took me 5 years to write this book instead of the 2 or 3 that I had estimated. So, and the truth is, probably 60% of my life and 80% of my work life is the test of this book. Because, I mean, as you know, it has over 100 different examples of people doing good at work. And those are all real examples. They're, distilled down to the essence in many cases. But I heard that or saw it in action and how it went. And so I think the concepts are kind of tested, field tested, for academics, in academic terms. But I also had, and I recommend if anybody out there, if you're thinking of writing a book, it's just get it out to people who can give you feedback. And I very deliberately sent an early version of it to my most like hypercritical friend. And I told them, like, just pretend you don't love me. Like, just pretend
Yeah.
I'm dead or
And he's a
something.
really
And
honest
boy, did
feedback.
he.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is about a year ago. And I thought I was getting close. And he said I had missed that mark, the one you talk about. And he said, you're trying to do way too much with one book. An entire section came out. It's now, it's now the length of, you can have a terrible Monday at work, say, I got to do something about this, order the book, if you order the ebook, start reading it, maybe finish reading it that night or the following night. And then on Wednesday, you can go in with a whole bunch of ideas on what you can do about your work. So, but the version he read was not that. It was somewhat of a slog, and it went, it just tried to do too much. So yes, I had lots of help, and there are others who gave feedback as well.
Yeah, when you sent it to me originally, I dove right into the first section, which is called Floundering, Why Work Fails Us. And I really was fascinated by the story you told about in your 20s. You're in this job, its pay is good, you got a great boss, she's giving you concert tickets. I mean,
Yeah.
not giving away too much of the book here, but can you talk to us, because we all have that. We all want to feel, it used to be not long ago that we thought, well, the whole social purpose thing, well, that's a millennial term. They all want to make sure they're doing something good. But I think I'm realizing I'm a baby boomer. I'm the last year of baby boomers, born in 64. I want to be doing good as well. Certainly, I need to be able to pay the bills and love the job and the people I work with. And thankfully, I do. I mean, I don't feel like I work anymore. I just feel like I get to wake up every day and play. And
Right.
there's a paycheck every 2 weeks, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And I get to go out and do community things too anytime I want to. But it really is something I'm finding, not only from reading your book, but also from conversations with a lot of people you and I know mutually, um, that social purpose is so critical. So go back, you're in your 20s, you're in this job. Kind of tell us about that chapter, if you will. Not the chapter of the book necessarily, but that
Right.
chapter of your life.
Yeah. So I'm in my 20s, and I have the job of my dreams, really, because I just finished graduate school, and I really wanted to. I love data analysis. Like, I'm an introvert. I can spend all this time with a database and make sense of it, and lose myself in it. So it's like, oh shoot, I forgot to have lunch. One of those experiences. And I start realizing that I'm kind of lying to people, because on paper my life looks really great, and they're like, how's everything be? And I'm like, it's great, really, it's great. And I'm thinking it should be great. I have this wonderful boss, and I have colleagues that for the most part bring joy into my life. I'm doing the work I said I wanted to do, the work I trained to do, and yet I don't feel great. And I'm getting paid enough, and I'm getting raises fast. Like, I think my first employer was afraid to lose me because I worked with clients. So I literally, like, every 2 months, I was like, we're giving you another raise. So I'm getting raises fast, and I'm not waking up in the morning and going, I can't wait to get to my computer and start doing the analysis that I love. And I really started feeling lost. I actually called it an existential crisis. And so I tell people, well, I got my existential crisis out of the way in my
Yeah, in your
20s.
20s. Yeah, exactly.
So, and I didn't really find my way out of that elegantly. I took another job that was like eerily similar to the one I left, expecting something different, and it 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 wasn't. It didn't feel different. And it wasn't until much later, when I had started doing this work of bringing social purpose into workplaces and jobs and brands, and that I realized, oh, uh, what what was wrong with me is what's wrong with the majority of corporate workers right now, is that I didn't have a sense of social purpose. I didn't feel like what I was doing really mattered. It mattered for, the owners of the company.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just mattered with a very small m.
Yeah.
And so, and you talked about feeling like you don't work any longer, and that actually is the way work historically, like prehistorically, felt like for humans. It's so much so, and the reason anthropologists know this is because prehistoric societies have no word for work. And we have many. We have like toil, labor, grind, work, and they're all negative, right?
Yeah.
And something, this is kind of a longer discussion, but something shifted in somewhere in our, in our history as humans, where work started feeling like something separate from the life that we loved. It used to be, apparently, if you're like 20,000 years ago and you wake up in the morning, the hunting expedition is going to go off, and you're like, woohoo, it's kind of like going to play golf now. And in fact, people hunt for fun now. So it's kind of, and if you didn't want to go, it wasn't seem like, what's that?
And people golf for work. It's kind of
right. That's true too. Yeah. And we envy them, right? We're like, wow, they get to play a game for work. Yeah. So that is actually, those two examples of hunting and golf are actually much more similar to what our birthright is than what we've turned work into. And so, and I know it's possible to do that because I've experienced it, you've experienced it, many other workers have experienced it. My father was an example of that, no matter what work he did. So the challenge is, how do we help everybody feel that way? Wake up and feel like they're going to play golf, or they're going to hunt, or they're going to, read a book for fun, more than, I gotta face that project.
Got to get through this textbook, or I got to get through this project, or I used to get what my wife termed the Sunday night blues, which was, I love my week. I still do love my weekend time with wife and kids and grandkids now and friends, and even in COVID, love the weekends. But yeah, Sunday nights, and it wasn't that I hated my job or my boss or anybody else. It was just, I didn't feel like maybe I wasn't being fulfilled. Maybe it's because I wasn't investing myself the right way and I wasn't working smart or fully committed. And I'm, guilty as charged. I've lost jobs, and a lot of it was my performance, and I'll admit that right here. But I would go to bed Sunday night just dreading going to work the next day. And a lot of it was, I just didn't feel fulfilled. And it's like, well, it's a nice paycheck, and I worked with some really lovely people, but there was something just kind of missing. So can you tell, having experienced this yourself, I know your finger went up, so you want to make a point. So once you make that point, and then I'll ask my question.
Okay. Yeah, you mentioned that, I'm at fault because my performance wasn't what it should be. But what a lot of people don't realize is that often the problem with performance is purpose. There's a professor at University of California in Berkeley, Hansen, and Morton Hansen, and he did research for 5 years on thousands of workers. And he was trying to figure out what makes workers effective, high performing. And one of the things he discovered was that we need passion. So we need to enjoy what we're doing.
Sure.
And we need purpose, which we need to feel like it matters. And he defines purpose the same way I do, which is a contribution to others or to a societal cause, something bigger than us. If you have both passion and purpose at work, on average, you perform in the 80th percentile. So you're in the top 20% of performers out there. If you take passion away, so now you're no longer doing what you love. Like what you really love is maybe you wanted to design clothing, and you're doing something else. You're doing copy editing because that's the job you could get. And there are a lot of young people in that situation right now, given the economy. And those are the lucky ones, right? Because at least they have a job.
Right.
So the good news to those of you who are there is that if you bring purpose into the job, you will still be at you will be set up, let's put it that way, to perform on average at the 64th percentile Okay, so that is still way up there,
Yeah.
right? Now, if you take purpose away, but you're doing what you love. So let's say you got that job as a clothing designer. It's like, this is what I really like to do. I like to choose the fabric and, how it flows. And I get totally lost in this. But you're designing that for very rich people, just adding one more thing to their closet. And you're like, is the world any better because of me?
Right.
Now you're down to the 20th percentile. So you're close to rock bottom.
Yeah.
So I think it's easy for us to beat up on ourselves and go like, what's wrong with me? Like, I should be able to perform better. And we rarely look at social purpose as a culprit, or at least a factor in undermining our performance, because this isn't a cognitive thing. This is all subconscious, essentially. It's actually physiological. Like we have our bodies function better, literally, when we are doing something that is meaningful than when we're doing something that we think is not. And so we don't connect the dots that way. We just think, well, I need to work harder. So I think your experience is quite common.
The word that came up for me as you're talking is the word legacy. I work with family businesses primarily. Many of my guests and almost all my clients are family-owned companies, and that's the pool I swim in all day long. And it would be really easy for me to just provide programs and resources for them, but where I've gone from, and I'm just going to make this personal to Ed Hart for a minute, but I think that I represent a pretty decent chunk of our audience anyway, is that just like you said, I mean, yeah, I'm really passionate about this. I mean, I love family businesses, and I love serving family businesses and serving with family businesses, and I've worked in them before, and that's great. Am I getting wealthy doing this? No, but that's not my goal. My goal is to put food on the table and shelter for the family and, save a few bucks and so forth. And that's happening. Where I shifted from this 20th percentile probably to, I feel like I'm in the 80th or 90th at this point, is when the job took on purpose, when I started really, and honestly, and this happened a few years ago, but it really has happened in 2020. And I've looked at my purpose here in this year in the world where we're now mostly working from home. People are suffering physically, financially, emotionally, every possible way this year.
Yeah.
And I've taken it upon myself and my wife and I and my clients within the family business arena to figure out how can we leave an impact from what we're getting to do this year. So I go to that word legacy, because a lot of families, that's their focus. And a lot of what I do is, I don't mean I want to leave a legacy that my kids are going to say, look what dad did, or look what grandpa did, and wow, the world's a better place because that heart was here. Yeah, I hope that, but I have no control 50 years from now what people say. But what I am hopeful is that I find the purpose for what I'm doing, and I'm feeling like I'm finding that.
Yeah.
And can you recognize in a person, I'll call you an expert, not just because you've written a book. I mean, writing a book doesn't make anybody an expert, but maybe a little more knowledge. But can you personally recognize when someone has purpose in their life and what they do just by a 1-minute conversation? Or you can probably see it in people's faces at times.
I'm like notoriously bad at reading people. I think everybody's a 10 and in every regard. And so, I've like taught classes, and someone in the back of the room will keep raising their hand, and I'll just keep calling on them and answering. And then in the break, my boss will be, what's wrong with you? Why do you keep calling on the person who's like trying to undermine you? And I was like, she is? I
didn't see that.
Even notice. So I think that for me, it's more like, I just assume, I live in this space, right? So I know that the stats say exactly the opposite, but I assume that everybody, of course, you're going to seek out social purpose in your job and do good. And then I'm like shocked when someone tells me there is no one at my work that I can trust. There is no one that would, hand me the note of what I missed in a meeting just to make sure that, you know, if I dropped off a call, just to make sure that I had everything I need. And I would never do that for someone else. Like, I am completely shocked when I hear stories like that. So I might not be the best person. And of course, because I'm so scientific oriented, you know, I'm cautious about saying, yeah, I can tell.
Right.
But I feel like I can in the negative. But what I will say is that there is research showing that, so they took students, business students, and they divided them into two groups. In one group, they were helping the same, they were consulting with the same bookstore, but one group was just told, this bookstore, you know, revenue has dropped X% in the last 3 years. Go help them improve their revenue. And by the way, if you do well, you'll get paying jobs. So there was like a monetary incentive there. And your team, you know, it's your personal success is kind of linked to this. Then the other group was told, hey, this bookstore has plummeting revenue for the last 3 years. It's a family-owned business. You'll like this story. It's a family-owned business. You know, it's their livelihood depends on it. They employ, you know, 6 people. Look at their pictures. You know, just a much more human contribution presentation of the task at hand. And then they had third-party graders on the consulting. They had no idea there were 2 groups. They were blind to this. So these are people that grade consulting advice all the time. And the group that had the social purpose positioning of the job did much better. In fact, they worked better together. They argued less, they were more cooperative, all these things. So my point is, whether I can or not, people can.
Yeah, somebody
We
can.
can,
Absolutely, sure.
yeah, and we may not think it's because of social purpose, but I think if we think back to people that were like, wow, they're hitting work on all cylinders and they're happy and they're fulfilled, that's not to say that they don't have challenges. I mean, I'm sure you have all sorts of challenges, and there are days where you want to pull your hair out, but
Yeah, that's another conversation too.
that's,
Yeah,
yeah. But if you think of people like that, and then you compare them to people who, you know, are complaining about their job a lot, or just can't wait to get out, or can't wait to retire, that distinction right there is often the social purpose divide. And so we can kind of all tell, even if we don't think that that's why.
sure. Now, one of the terms that I see in your book a lot is the word job purposing.
Mm-hmm.
Can you take me through that a little bit? I mean, I've looked at the back of the book and I've read it and I know the answer, but I'm curious how that term came about. And yeah, talk about job purposing for me if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, so job purposing is anything that we do as part of our work experience to make a social purpose contribution. That can be helping a colleague figure out PowerPoint, frankly. Uh, and that can be redefining your family run business as a zero waste or zero environmental impact. So it can be something very small, it can be something lofty and large, but you've done something to shape your work week
Mm-hmm.
or work in general towards social purpose. And yeah, so that's what job purposing is.
Okay. There's a quote in your book that I love, and from Poppy, your dad.
Yeah.
And I wrote this down when I read it, and I've shared it with a lot of people. Shared it with my wife last night, and she goes, "Well, send that to me. I got to write that down." And I love this because to me, this resonates with everything we've talked about in our first 25 minutes and probably where we're going to go the rest of the way too. And that is, and you, my listeners and viewers, are going to love this too, especially the ones I know well. Listen beyond the clamor of your wants for the whisper of the world's needs. I love that. I mean, to me, that's so powerful because, yeah, it's really easy for us to make lots of money and be in a job that we love and work with people we love, and we're fulfilling, you know, everything I want. I've got the house, I've got the car, I've got the trips to Maui, I've got. Everything's just, you know, wonderful. And I don't necessarily mean that has to be materialistic, and I don't think you mean that either necessarily. But, and fulfilling the world's needs. I can't just, you know, provide clean drinking water to, you know, kids in Nigeria who don't have it if I don't have the wherewithal to do it. So walk me through that delicate balance of, yeah, I have to do what I love doing and I have to do what the world needs, but I have to make a living. So can you walk through that kind of balance for us a little bit?
I can. I'm going to show you. I'm going to have a visual of that.
I love it. I
Can you
saw
see
that in the book.
it?
Yeah, for those that
So,
are listening, it's a picture early on in the book, a drawing of her dad with that quote. We're going to talk about your drawings comment in your bio too. I got to go back to that in a little while. She's an
yeah.
artiste.
Yeah. So
Yes.
I tried to, as you know, there's a lot of wisdom from a lot of different people in this book, you know,
Sure.
from my dad to Oprah to Melinda Gates and a bunch of academics. So when a quote I thought was really fundamental to a concept just for fun, I was like, well, let's highlight the quote with a cartoon drawing so that he's the first one in the book like that. So making a living is really important.
Of course.
It's essential, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that being, frankly, it can even be like your number one priority, especially if I mean, it should be your number one priority. And if your safety isn't secured, if your shelter isn't secured, if your food isn't secured, that should probably be your number one priority. What's interesting is that we tend to think that being focused on social purpose and being focused on ourselves, or it's like a seesaw, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm more focused on social purpose, then I'm less focused on myself, and then I'm gonna starve, right? And speaking of Adam Grant, he's also quoted in the book. I'm not going to try to quote him off of memory, but what research finds is that to say the more social purpose I have, then the less I make is kind of like saying the more humorous I am, the less vegetables I eat. They're completely independent.
Mutually exclusive, sure.
Yeah, they're completely independent.
Although that's true for me. I don't eat a lot of vegetables and I'm a pretty funny guy. So.
Well, if you're going to have to choose between the two for the rest of us, good choice.
Exactly.
I don't know what your wife thinks about that, but
yeah.
so we're more capable than we think of doing both. And I don't think that we should feel bad about wanting a raise. We shouldn't. And again, the research is backing me up on this, but I also feel strongly there's nothing wrong with saying, I want that 20% bonus, and boy, I'm going to make 3 more calls today, and that's what I have in mind right now. What we should be aware of, though, is that motivation, it peters out pretty quickly, both in terms of time, like some research shows it's just a couple of days, but also in terms of where you are, on that, life comfort scale, right? So once you have safety and shelter and all those basic needs met, that motivation doesn't work very well. So I don't think they contradict each other. I don't think they cancel each other out. I just think what happens is that we think we can really only do one. So unfortunately, But fortunately, you'll see why I'm saying this. Uh, there are so many needs out there. I mean, you know, you have someone on your team who is going through a difficult time because they just found out their spouse has cancer. You have clients that are, or customers that are having a really hard time. You have trash in the parking lot. You have you know, plastic that you're using going into the ocean. Like, there are so many needs in the world that we could help meet, that there is a way to contribute, to choose those that you can contribute to and that don't derail you from getting that bonus.
Yeah.
And so I actually advise that if there's an opportunity to do social purpose in front of you, but it's going to undermine your ability to get that management job, find a different way to contribute. Don't do that one.
Yeah. You
You know,
talked about contribute, and we all hear that there's three, and I've heard a fourth from Dr. Ken Blanchard, who I've gotten to know pretty well over the last few years. The
oh, lucky
time,
you. Yeah.
he's amazing, and
Yeah.
he,
I love the interview you did of him.
yeah, that was my first guest. Thank
Yeah.
you. That was to get him, and there's a story behind that. But yeah, Dr. Blanchard is a close friend and a mentor, and I'm just so blessed to have a couple of my books behind me are books by him. But we've all heard the time, talent, treasure. He added, when I heard him speak for one of the first times, the word touch, which is really that, you know, kind of that emotional, not just the physically being there with somebody, which is a big part of it. When you hear those three are added in touch, those four, time, talent, and treasure, lots of different ways we can give. From your background, and let's just maybe just talk your experience, expertise or not, but your experience, what's the most satisfying to you to give of your time? Probably the answer is it depends. I get that that's probably the answer to just about everything. But for you, have you found more that you get more when you write a check, or you get more when you give someone just time with them, or maybe you have a talent that others need and you give of that? Is there anything for you that works most, or that you see in your research or in conversation with folks?
Yeah.
Because I
So,
want the person making $10 an hour to know that they don't have to wait till they're a millionaire to start
right.
having more social purpose. And I don't want the person who's the
Oh, I
millionaire to
love
think
that.
they just have to write a check.
Yep. Yep. People, listen to Ed. He's right.
Yeah, thank you.
That's
Yeah,
exactly
finally,
right.
totally. Yeah.
And you know what's amazing is that in the book, I've talked about the relationship between giving and performance. And really, a lot of the book is, if for no other reason, do good at work, because you'll be higher performing, you'll be more motivated, you'll like your job more, but
Yeah.
you'll also be healthier,
Yeah.
you'll also be happier. And now there's research coming out that you'll be richer. So uh, a lot of it is about uh, how it serves you better to contribute to others, right? The the interesting thing is that the person, it appears that if all you can do is uh, be kinder, just be kinder to whoever you interact with at work. And that might mean, like, remembering that they have kids and writing down their name, so that the next time you talk to them is say, hey, you know, how did Margaret's you know, whatever. I was going to say
Yeah.
soccer game, but those don't exist any longer.
Yeah. I was going to say, yeah.
Virtual soccer
Yeah.
game
How
go.
do video games? Yeah.
Right. Virtual soccer game go.
Yeah.
If that's all you can do, you are actually going to benefit from just as much of all those things: the performance boost, the happiness boost, the uptick in your immune response. So our immune system is stronger if we're doing pro-social things. Then the billionaire who just wrote the check for $2 million. So we're wired to kind of notice that it's a social purpose thing and go, oh, let's drop the cortisol, the stress hormone, and let's bring up the oxytocin, and let's bring up the dopamine, and that is triggered with, and then they've tested this with as little as a $5 donation, and
Yeah.
they were Canadian dollars. So it's even less than
Well, great.
five
My
US.
Canadian friends are going to love that. I tease with them all the time. That's great. And my wife's
So,
Canadian and her heritage.
yeah. And then they tested it with, well, what happens if you give a $20 donation? And it was no different. So I love your point about, if all you can do is something small, do that, because you will start benefiting from these things. And the other thing is, that small thing could be huge for someone else. There's, one time I was at the Dallas airport, and I heard the security line officer, who was checking IDs. And of course, IDs have a birth date, right? Just sing happy birthday to this middle-aged woman. And, he sang very well, and it was very short, but upbeat. And so when I got up to the front of the line, and I was like, oh, is that job purposing? Like, what is that? Like, or does he know her? I didn't know, right? So I'm always doing research. I'm always asking people, like, what brings, like, I get in an Uber, and I'm like, when do you feel a sense of purpose? I'm I'm kind of a nerd. I'm annoying. Don't sit next to me in a plane.
You're a nerdy introvert, so you want the data, but you're introverted.
Right.
For you to have the conversation.
Yeah. Once I have the data, just shut up. Don't tell me anything else.
Don't ever know the rest. Yeah.
Right. Boy,
Right.
You figured me out quickly, Ed.
Yeah.
So I asked him, well, hey, did I hear you saying happy birthday? And he tells me this story that he's a singer in a punk band, and he loves singing. And so this is kind of a passion thing too, right? He has this work where he has his day job where he didn't get to sing. But one time he was kind of messing around with doing this to people, for singing happy birthday to people. And then this gentleman came in, and it was in the evening, and he had mobility problems, and he sang his syncopated quick happy birthday to him. And this gentleman looked up at him, and had watery eyes, and said, do you know that you're the only person who has recognized my birthday today?
Wow.
And so Adesh, that's the name of the security officer, said, when I heard that, I was like, I'm never skipping another one, because I don't know what I might be contributing. Yeah. And there was a female officer, on the lane next to it, and she jumped into the conversation, and she said, I loved her point, because she said, I've heard several people tell Adesh, it's like, wow, you just made my day, and it was a terrible day until right now, because no one had recognized my birthday. I guess he hears that like once a week or something. But she also said, which I thought was such a brilliant point, she said, and all those other people that maybe they've received dozens of birthday texts and Facebook notifications and who knows what about their birthday, she goes, but I have no doubt that moment, there was more joy in their life as well, even if they aren't in a bad place.
And that's the one that they're going to remember when they tell people in a week or two, how was your birthday? Let me tell you what happened at DFW Airport.
Right. It's a great story. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right. It's unexpected. And that's actually, so really no kind act is too small to make a difference.
The starfish story, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
The what story?
The little boy.
Oh, the starfish. Yes.
Yeah, starfish.
I love that story.
Just one starfish at a time in the ocean. The guy says, what are you doing? I'm saving these, and there's millions of them. And, for those that haven't heard it, it goes on that the gentleman says, well, you can't, make a difference to all of these. There's millions of starfish on the beach. And the little kid picks one up, throws it in the water, and says, I just made a difference to that one.
Right.
That sticks with me. I love that. I've heard that story and told it hundreds and hundreds of times in my life. Yeah. It still makes me emotional, because that's the key right there. That's the one person. And I think that answers my question a little bit. I mean, as far as, and it varies. I used to take the train into LA every day for work, and it was about an hour-long train ride. And some days I would just take the train and read a book. Some days I'd talk to the guy or the gal next to me. Some days I would make it a conscious effort that, okay, I'm going to smile at 10 people on this train today and not say a word. those were the best days. I never got, rarely, sometimes, but very rarely did I ever get any feedback from anyone of the difference it made.
Yeah.
But I know because they simply smiled back that it made a difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't have to be a millionaire to smile at somebody and change their day.
Yeah. And again, we're hardwired for this. Like when you smiled at, those unsuspecting strangers or whatever, whether they knew it or not, physiologically, they are now poised for a happier day.
Yeah.
Like their brain might not, their frontal cortex might not register it, but there are parts of the brain going, yippee, yippee, this is great,
Yeah.
Um, you
Someone's
know,
coming. It's just sometimes we just don't, let me interject 1 second here, and I'd love to get your response to this, and I apologize for interrupting, but it's my show, so I get to, right?
yeah, you can just edit me out anyway.
No, never. I'm going to edit me out. Trust me, I'm going to block this side of the screen and only have it be you. I've heard people say, and I've said it myself too, and an observation that I've noticed in 2020 as we're living on Zoom and MS Teams and all these other platforms where we're virtual right now, that, yeah, the difficult part of this is we're not having had a conversation with Joe Hernandez today. He's with our bank that is our big title sponsor for the Center for Family Business. And we were talking about how we miss the human interaction, and I do. And we get a little of that still. But what I am loving about this, and I hate to go all silver lining during COVID, but what I do love about this is the intention in every conversation now seems more authentic than ever before. I can't remember the last time I said to somebody, hey, how you doing? When I really was just saying, hey, I see you, and I'm going to go on to the next thing in my day. Now, if I could be, how you doing? I'm waiting for your response. We're going somewhere with this.
Yeah.
And so that, I guess, for me and my personality type, I like that because I feel like I may not be connecting with as many people right now as I did 8 months ago, but I'm connecting more deeply with those that I am. So
Yeah.
anyway, that's just my little side note, and my listeners have heard me say it before, but for me, it just kind of came up.
Yeah. You asked the question, when is it most fulfilling? When is social purpose, acts of social purpose more when are acts of social purpose most fulfilling for me? And we know, I keep going to the research, but it's true for me as well. As you know, in the book, there are 8 drivers of high impact job purposing. And I'm not going to go through all 8 of them, but the idea is that research has shed a lot of light on why doing good for others feels so good, is so helpful for our careers, for our wellness, for all of that. And they're synthesized into 8 drivers. The acronym is We Give It, which is a little dorky, but hopefully it's memorable. So, but I do want to mention just 2,
okay,
because it's very relevant right now to our virtual meetings. And one of them is impact evidence. So that's I in the acronym, of course. And that is, if we so your smile example was a good one because you were doing that and it doesn't sound like you had evidence that it helped anyone. And that's still a great thing to do. And you probably intuitively knew it did because people have smiled at you and you know that. But if you try something like that and you're like, well, or this didn't really do anything for me, like I actually forgot I did that, it was that non-memorable, it might be that you don't, your cognitive brain doesn't have information that it actually helped. So that is one of the factors that makes it feel fulfilling to us. The other one, which is closely related, and this is where I pulled from Adam Grant research, and is viscerally felt. So our brain can tell us that $5 donation is going to do something for the victims of the wildfires in California or Australia or wherever. But there's no emotional message that says the same thing. And the emotional message usually comes from the human interaction.
Yeah.
So it's that person who lost their house saying, with teary eyes probably, I can't tell you how grateful I am that the community came together and, got us temporary housing near where, we needed to be or whatever. So I think both of those in some senses are disrupted because we're not face to face with people at work, and we're not sitting across from them in the meeting room and someone goes, oh my God, you saved my life. Thank you for mentoring me on this or helping me with that. And so they're both disrupted because of that. And so I think that the way that you're using the virtual communication and asking that question and really checking in with people is a bridge to that again. And that's probably why it's gone so well. So anyway, that's
your story. You're sticking with it, right? Yeah. No, I like that. So what else? Share anything you'd like about the book and what, I mean, not so necessarily what caused you to write it and everything. We can read about that, more the why. And are there, I've got all the chapters listed in my notes here, and I have a few that I have bold that I thought I'd go to, but I'd rather just defer to you. Maybe what have some of the results been? I know it's new, I know it's just come out, but certainly, top 30 books to read, Adam Grant, certainly. I know a couple of the people that have, given testimonials in there. Ryan Gottfredson, who was my previous guest prior to you.
Yeah, I love Ryan, yeah.
Ryan at Cal State Fullerton as well, and I've read his book and getting to know him. But what are some of the early returns? Here we are in election year. Let's talk about early returns that you're finding either for you or for those that are reading the book.
Yeah. So the early versions of the book, I would send them to people and go, give me your feedback. And they would give feedback on the book, just like I had asked, this section
Your friend
feels
who tore it apart a year ago and you took the whole section out, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But when I knew it was getting close was when the feedback became, I'm sorry, I stopped reading at chapter 4 because I realized, oh my God, I've been doing my staff meetings all wrong. Like there's no sense of social purpose. And I have 3 ideas on how we can end every staff meeting with people knowing that they make a difference, or the team making a difference together, or shining light on a cause. So that's when I knew, oh, okay, this is what I'm hoping for, that it actually is actionable. And I was over the moon that one of the adjectives that Adam Grant used to describe the book is that it is actionable. And so so I love seeing how people are applying it. And there are very few readers at this point because, of course, it doesn't officially exist yet. But it's making me so anyway, that's one example. And then when they wrote me that email, that reader that said, I'm sorry, I stopped at chapter 4, and then by the time I came back, it's gonna take me longer to read the whole book and give you feedback. I actually shared a story that comes from our friend Charles Antis, because what he does at staff meetings is there's one team member recognized at every staff meeting, and they get a charitable donation card. Yeah. And I can't remember what the amount is, but let's just, it's like $30 or something. They can contribute these $30 from Antis Roofing to whatever nonprofit they'd like. And then at the next staff meeting, they're invited to share who they chose and why. And so you have people explaining how hospice made the last weeks of their mother's life, and you can see how this tilts the whole culture toward something bigger than just coming into work and saying, we're going to do 14 and a half roofs,
right.
Get them done. And I mean, it's such a powerful practice. And if you hear anybody who is in those staff, because I always ask about it when I see their staff, but when I see Charles' staff, if you hear anybody who's at those staff meetings describe it, you completely get why it's so visceral.
Yeah.
And why it's so powerful, but it's a simple thing to do. So I can't claim credit for that one. Charles came up with that.
Yeah, and I've been hearing you
Maybe.
talking about that,
Yeah.
and he shared even just on that conversation he and I had with Ryan last week about the shift in his team when he went that way, and especially this year. I mean, I know he's been doing it for prior than 2020, but
Yeah.
this year they're seeing him and Wayne Lamb of Blah, who's out feeding people, and I've been to the blood drive a couple of times at Angel's Roofing and given blood, and I've seen people there that are like doing it for the first time, and just that like I talk a lot about what and why, and that why, now I'm doing this and I get it. And the employees at Angel's Roofing are seeing their leader out there in the community giving.
Yeah.
And I think not only are they inspired to give because of the gift cards that you just talked about, but also they're seeing that he's practicing what he's preaching. He's out there doing it too.
Yeah.
Can you go?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no. Yeah. Let me just say something about that. Because I said there's 8 drivers, and
Okay.
one of them is tenderly led. And so for those of you out there who are managers, if you care, I mean, frankly, if you just care, I mean, of course you care. It's whether you show that you care. And I know that that means vulnerability, but if you care about COVID affecting people, about the economic downturn, increasing unemployment, about your own staff having to uh, juggle all these difficult things that they didn't have to juggle before. If you just care, you will be a better manager.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that Charles, in his own telling of his own story, he just kind of discovered that, like, it's okay to be vulnerable, and actually it's productive.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that is contrary to what a lot of us feel we've been told, which is like, you should, if you're going to lead people, you got to be just solid as a rock all the time and not be emotional. And it turns out that that's a good way to undermine your leadership.
Yeah. Well, you can't lead people that you can't connect with. And one of the ways we connect is through that caring, that humility. We talked with Brian last week about vulnerability and about humility and servant leadership. And that comes up almost in every conversation I have, not just because of Ken Blanchard, although it's big.
Yeah.
Servant leadership's a term that goes back a couple thousand years, at least.
Yep.
When you work with these companies like Aetna and Allstate, Caesars Entertainment, Disney, et cetera, I mean, the list is long. What types of things? I mean, I know it's different with everyone, but why do they bring you in? And this is a chance to plug you a little bit, because I want this to be more than just a fun hour that we get together, and for the listeners to be edified by this, which I'm sure they are. But certainly, as a thank you to you for spending this time with me, tell me what kind of work you do with these companies. If there's a company out there right now that's struggling with figuring out either what their company purpose is, or trying to help their team members figure out what their individual purpose is. Because you don't have to have 3,000 people who work with you all having the same purpose, and you're not going to have that.
Right.
What type of work do you do with these companies to help them in this social purpose arena?
Yeah. So often there's a pain point, which is why they call me.
Mm-hmm.
And the pain point might be, frankly, so there's one business that called me a few months ago, that Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, is, and they're the largest asset fund in the world, I think, is one of their investors. And he wrote in a letter in January the year before, we're going to stop investing in companies that don't have social purpose. So sometimes the pain point is that business related. And so they're like, okay, we got to do something because we need them as an investor. And sometimes it's people knowing maybe not, all the research that we've talked about, but knowing partly intuitively, partly out of experience, partly reading other people's great books out there that they lay the foundation for a lot of what's in my book, that it's not quite right to have work without social purpose. And so often when it's a millennial calling me,
Hmm.
they're starting from there. They're just like, okay, I finally got to the point where I have enough budget to kind of decide what it is that I can do with my own team. And I'm pretty sure that it would be a really great thing to bring social purpose into my team. And so, yeah, I think the second is happening more and more. I mean, I don't think there's any, some people have called this that we're in a purpose revolution. We had the information revolution and the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, not in that order. I got them all wrong, but, and now we're in a purpose revolution. And I do think that there is this awakening happening as well.
Yeah.
And, yeah. So then I help them meet that need,
Help them figure out what it looks like and how to balance that. Because like we said, there could be 100 or 200 or 1,000 or 3,000 employees. And
yeah,
like what Charles is doing, here's your $30 giving card.
yeah.
Now go figure out where you're going to give. And then more importantly, come back and tell us the why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, one of my favorite things to do, I mean, I certainly help like figure out what to do. So like, for example, Caesars Entertainment, they're really social purpose oriented actually, and win awards for it every year. And they're very generous, so I can share their case studies. And so one of the things that they realized was, we have hotels, and anybody who runs a hotel is at risk of inadvertently harboring sex trafficking.
Hmm.
And so their executives were really just personally kind of disgusted when they kind of realized this, and they wanted to do something about it. So they started by training their security staff on what sex trafficking is, what it's like to be a victim, that they are victims. They're typically the people who are performing the sexual acts for commercial purposes are doing it because they have to. It's under duress of some,
Right.
this is not a choice.
So slavery.
Yes. And those so I get to analyze their data. And again, they're very generous about me sharing it. But the data shows that these, the security staff, and, they formally had a really hard line. It's like, no, that woman broke the law, and there wasn't a whole lot of empathy, a whole lot of compassion. They take the training and they become essentially like victim advocates, and it kind of shifts their job more towards social purpose. And I know, so there's a pre-test and a post-test, and I know that their sense of purpose goes up, and so does their willingness to work harder at the job, or their employee engagement. But what really amazed me was that there was a supervisor who was against this to begin with, because it's like, well, what does this have to do with our job? We just have to follow the law and the regulations, and this is not our problem. Like, why should our brand be caring about this? And I talked to him after he had gone through the training, and I asked him, what did you think? And he said, I can't believe how narrow-minded I was.
Hmm.
And this part of my job, this helping to reduce the global issue of sex trafficking, is the part of my job I am now least willing to give up.
Love that.
And, this training was pretty sophisticated, but but it's short. It's only an hour long. But if you think about it, this is not a huge intervention. Like, it's not like designing a social purpose program, or I mean, I even hesitate to use program because it doesn't have to be that formal. But designing ways for your team to do social purpose, it doesn't have to be some really complex
Right.
multi-year thing. It can be something really simple, as the Charles and the gift cards shows. But even the Caesars Entertainment, that took several months to put together, and they have this amazing sex trafficking expert who comes in and does the training. But it's not rocket science. There
Right.
isn't all that. There isn't
Yeah.
anything all that complicated about it.
I've heard people say that it's really, sometimes it's just a simple question of what breaks your heart. I've heard pastors say this. I've heard nonprofit leaders say, I sat in a sermon from a pastor a couple of years ago, and the message was, how can you get involved? And it wasn't necessarily to try to encourage people to serve at that particular church, but it was more social purpose. That wasn't the term he used, but it's kind of the definition.
Right.
And he said, just ask yourself what breaks your heart.
Yeah.
And if you figure out the answer to what breaks your heart, and the other question I've heard too is, what is it that you cannot not do?
Right.
No matter what I do, there has to be this in my job. There has to be this in my day-to-day work. And if you can get the answer to those two questions, what breaks your heart and what is it that you cannot not do?
Yeah.
You're headed right into making a huge difference.
Yeah, and those are fantastic. That's really good guidance. And I would say, if you start work on a Monday morning and you end on a Saturday or Friday or however long your week is, and nothing broke your heart, then
wow,
you're not being yourself.
yeah.
So, which by the way is very, very typical in workplaces. We've designed them to be sterile and objective and hard edged, and we're these emotional social creatures going in there, and so we know to basically crush that part of us, and to give that PowerPoint presentation or show the sales numbers, and it's not good for us. So if nothing is breaking your heart in the workplace or in your work activities, then it might be time to think, how much of myself am I bringing to work?
Yeah.
And
we can be robots and just go about and just put, like you said, just put the labels on the jars and just do that all day long. And, as you talked about in the book, the significant increases or the gradual increases might make you do more labels on more jars and more hours. But at the end of the day, other than maybe, a label process that could break your heart that we're spending so much money, then that's great if that's what it is.
Yeah.
But, how to make my company more productive. But yeah, that bigger why is more important.
Yeah.
When you agreed to come on From the Heart with me a while back, what did you hope that message would be that you could get out? Or what did you hope maybe even one listener today would get from this conversation?
For anybody who feels that their work doesn't matter, that's a painful place to be. And you don't have to stay in that place. And you don't have to change jobs or careers. So I say, if your job doesn't improve the world, then it's time to improve your job.
Yeah, I was just going to say those words. Yeah. Yeah. What's the best way for my audience to reach you if they want to get your book, they want to learn more about the work you do? A lot of people who watch and listen to the show, and I'm proud to say that we now have listeners all over the world. I've seen the study, and we've got about 14 different countries And that might be one person in Pakistan. I'm not going to sit here and say we have 1,000 listeners in Pakistan by any stretch, but that one person who wants to reach out because maybe they're thinking of how do I need some help. I need someone to coach me on how to find my social purpose. I just don't know how. I don't know what breaks my heart. I don't know what I cannot not do. Or that CEO who says, I need a Charles Antis like program in my company. What's the best way to reach you so they can get that process started?
Yes, the best way is to go to the URL dogoodatwork.com.
Cool.
And then from there you can find everything. In terms of buying the book, to help with exactly those questions, it's sold everywhere around the world. So you can actually get, if you're elsewhere around the world, you know what your outlet is. But if you go to dogoodatwork.com, you'll see that, there's UK, Australia, you can buy it in Singapore, you can buy it anywhere. It is in English right now. So I'm hoping that your listeners are okay reading or listening to English right now. But yeah. So it's a little bit early for other languages, but that's probably the only limitation.
Part Venezuelan? Aren't you part Venezuelan? Is that?
I am. Yes, I was born in Venezuela, and yes, I am. I'm an immigrant.
Yep, I lived in Ecuador for a while, so.
Ecuador.
Ambos hablan español. We both speak Spanish.
Muy bien.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So, well, Bea, this has gone by too fast, and
I agree.
I hope the listeners agree with that. I know I've gotten a lot out of this, and I'm excited, and I really encourage all of you who are listening to not just pick up the book because you're going to help Bea, but pick up the book because it's going to help you. But even more so, pick it up because it's going to help somebody else. And ultimately, that's what
well said.
We're here to help other people. We're not here. I tell all my students in every class I teach, I've told my kids growing up, and when my grandsons get a little older and can comprehend a real deep philosophical conversation with grandpa, because it's coming. I'm going to
warning, run, kids, run.
Because I got 7 grandsons from 9 down to 2. And the message will always be, think about the other person first. That whole what's in it for me with them, just throw that out the door. What's in it for other people, serve others, give value first. And I think that's really what social purpose is all about, is how can I go to work, make a living, make a life, but ultimately how can I touch and bless somebody else's life with what I do or what I give or with my talent or my touch. So I appreciate your time today.
Yeah. No, it was my pleasure. And those kids are lucky to have you.
Well,
the sooner they understand that, the better their lives will go.
I got to tell you a funny story, and it's being recorded, and it's really just for you. The song "It Had to Be You." I don't know who wrote it, but Harry Connick Jr. made it famous in a movie, and I can't even pull that right now. My 9 and 6-year-old grandsons that live with us they both have autism, and so that's an area where we give, and we would like to do more. Yeah. But most nights when I'm around at their bedtime, which is a lot now, I will go in after their mom and my wife have gone in and read a story and tucked them in and so forth. And they always ask Grandpa to sing to them. And I don't have a good voice. It's not about the voice, but it's how I do it. I sing and I tickle and I slow the words down and speed them up. And it had to be you, wonderful you. And the boys just love it. Well, a couple of nights ago, I wasn't here. And my daughter went in with her phone, and my 9-year-old grandson, Makua, sang the song, and it's the most. I'm probably going to take it and put it on my YouTube channel, or at least in the audio. It's just so sweet, and that confirmed for me that maybe I'm making a little difference with one starfish.
Yes.
And so that's why we're doing this.
Yeah.
So let me just finish. Sorry, I'm all sobbing now. I didn't mean to go there.
There's nothing wrong with that. You're a good leader.
Well, I'm surrounded by great leaders who give us rubbing off. So the name of the podcast, Bea, is From the Heart. So this is where you get to now tell me what's in your heart.
Gratitude. I'm I feel very fortunate that I got to spend this hour with you on this conversation, and hopefully contributed in some small way to your like beautiful vision of this podcast.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
It's been my pleasure.